Wee.
Sorry for the delay. I was actually called to restart my computer, and I just remembered how painful it is to actually work with the Microsoft, because it takes ages to reload all of the applications and log into all of the all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm used to working with Linux
Yeah,
more or
Linux
less.
is great, but I'm using Windows right now, but in general I like Linux.
Yeah, for some reason Microsoft is actually I mean, I'm more used to using Microsoft for the likes of some of the, Word applications and whatnot. So I'm slowly looking for an alternative, because Linux really doesn't support Office, and the alternatives are just a little bit more clumsy.
There's Open. Let me check. I think I have the Windows version installed. It's like called Open Doc, or I have my keyboard unplugged. Open. I can't. No, I definitely have it installed on here. It's like Libri something.
You mean
Open
like
Library.
the word processing application for Linux?
Yeah.
You mean
LibreOffice Writer.
Yeah. I have that one, but it's a little bit clunky in comparison.
Yeah, it's a little clunky, but I think it's the job done.
I'm actually thinking, because I'm gonna, as I handed in my resignation, I'm also gonna hand in my Windows working PC, and I'm just gonna probably install like a partition for Windows, just if I need some access to some Windows applications. But anyways, let me not bother you with the nitty gritty of IT backbone problems.
That could be its own call. I'd be interested, because, for example, I'm using Windows right now because the virtual background doesn't work on my Ubuntu. So Zoom doesn't make Linux.
Yeah, that's interesting. I actually, yesterday I was trying to record something using Zoom, and I figured out, because I was, I don't have I have my laptop kind of in a more portable way in my living room, and I just plugged into Zoom there, and I noticed that the Linux, I have a Mint Linux Mint Ubuntu version right now, and the Zoom application doesn't allow for background, which is it's really weird.
Yeah, and maybe it's a weird permission thing. I don't know.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, I spent like 30 minutes trying to set it up, and I was unsuccessful. So
it's like, okay, time to give up. But for today's talk, we're going to talk about nutrition, diet, and was that it, or were we also talking about psychedelics? I can't remember. My conversations are blurring with other people.
I think psychedelics was a part of
the food of the gods.
I was just gonna say psychedelics are a part of a good diet, right?
Perfect. And the soul nutrition as well, I read someplace that psychedelics are love letters from nature to human beings. That was a good explanation.
Love letters
especially from nature, especially cannabis. That kind of, it's not a psychedelic, it's more psychoactive.
I mean, I guess, psychoactive, psychedelic, that's really perhaps another rabbit hole to jump into in terms of etymology and definitions. But I think we interchangeably use many different descriptors for this. And I think mind-altering substances, it's also a very wide category, because if we look at coffee and tea, for example, those are also mind.
Water too, right?
Exactly.
Tea I'm drinking. So I wrote in a paper in college, and it was like a rabbit hole, right, of how you define a drug, right? Because it's literally just anything that alters the body. So I'm like, if you look at a pretty lady and you get aroused, is that a drug? Like, technically it is.
Absolutely.
It's internal, right? The chemicals being released are internal, but you have like a whole drug system in your brain. Right. So
yeah, and you know what's really interesting when we hit this topic, for me, for example, which is, you know, it's still kind of fresh, breastfeeding and milk in general, and this evolutionary trait as young human beings enter this world. If you look at the constitution of mother's milk, and that can be human milk or any milk whatsoever from any mammal, it has a very specific substance, a very specific molecule called casomorphin. And that casomorphin actually triggers this dopamine effect, which is, you know, linked to an addictive kind of wanting to get back to it even more kind of response. And this is really this is really an evolutionary trait, because, you know, the baby needs to feed more frequently and with larger quantities in order to ensure survival in the, you know, in the material realm. So it would make sense that we have this chemical triggering mechanism, which just kind of evokes this emotion in babies to go for more milk and more frequently. But then you know, all mammals have a weaning period whereby they stop feeding on their mother's milk and transition into a diet which is, let's say, optimal for the species itself, right? It's interesting though that in human beings, we're pretty much the only animal on this planet that kind of incorporates all casomorphins or all dairy-based products back into the menu even after the weaning period.
The sad diet, standard American diet.
Yeah, really sad.
But human beings are also the only living creature that uses milk from other creatures, right?
Yeah.
Or eats, drinks.
Oh, cats technically drink cow's milk too.
Do they? Or is it
my cat will lick a few licks and then he'll give up.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they don't really do that. I've been in my childhood, I've spent a lot of time in at my grandparents outside of the city limits, and we had at some point in time about 100 different cats who were essentially a part of the family, let's say, on the estate. And I had the chance to really observe cat behavior up close, and there was really this disconnect in my mind with all of the, let's say, television broadcasts, all of the cartoons and all of this mythological imagery of a cat and its relationship to cow's milk. It really was, it was kind of, for me, you know, hard to connect those two things when I saw that cats literally don't drink milk. So I wasn't able to put a finger on it until I understood a little bit better how, you know, predictive programming, patterning, and conditioning works. So gut milk is definitely one of the most dangerous parts of propaganda that we've
got
devised.
Health problems? Want heart disease?
Yeah.
Got heart disease?
got heart. In Sweden, in the 50s, in the 40s and 50s, they had like the government pulled like milk fairs for free for people to encourage more milk and dairy in the lives, you know, of people.
Need more calcium. There's no calcium in greens. Don't tell them.
Yeah. Where is Terrence when you need him, you know? I wouldn't be doing this if I were you.
Yeah. Why are you drinking milk?
Yeah.
You have to stop drinking milk.
Yes.
from the bones of a dying industry.
Yeah.
But to be honest, until like the Sovereign Man week 3 or 4, and Alexander, when you like gave the links to, was it nutritionfacts.org and How Not to Die, to be honest, I was like pretty unaware of most of this. So even though I'm joking about it now, just 2-3 months ago, I was chugging milk like a good boy, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really mind-blowing for me as well when field of nutrition and optimizing health. And when I uncovered all of those very vocal and very extensive meta studies, conclusions, recommendations from medical doctors and nutritionists and researchers from the entire field, I was really, first, I was pissed off. I was really, really upset because I realized that I was being lied to, and we were all being lied to essentially in exchange for profit margin and shareholder stock optimization of the biggest industry within the agricultural animal food processing companies. So then I chilled out. I made myself some hummus, and I calmed my nervous system. But it's really interesting. I mean, the ubiquitous presence of all of those let's say chunks of memes such as gut milk and bone calcium and whatnot. Those are all kind of, if perceived from this lens, we could just as easily describe them as mimetic viruses that kind of spread profit margin.
Hold up 2 seconds.
Okay. Lactose intolerance is a result of people not being used to milk, right?
Lactose intolerance.
Nice talking, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear it, Trevor?
I don't think he can hear us.
Yeah, probably not.
Go on lactose intolerance.
The lactose intolerance part is really fascinating, because you will find, and that is especially in the Asian genetic pool, right? Lactose tolerance. There's a specific metabolic process that is missing, which is why the world on average in terms of humanity, about 60 to 70% are lactose intolerant, because we do, as all of the other mammals, we go through the weaning period, right? So I mean, obviously there's debate on how exactly the Western gene, for example, with this migratory, nomadic, herding, tribal patterns evolved, developing and extending the validity of this enzyme, which breaks down milk sugar into digestible, absorbable calories. So it's arguable that the migratory and feeding patterns and this evolutionary trait made sure that a specific gene pool had access to the ability to actually metabolize milk sugar. And that is arguably just a testament to human adaptability and flexibility. You will even see, which is specifically interesting in the Eskimo population, because they eat exclusively almost seal fat and baby seals and whatnot, or at least had been doing that for the majority of history until Big Mac came around to old Alaska.
The seal burger.
Like seal.
And you will find, what I wanted to point out to is that the Eskimo population, their gene pool, actually allows them to be able to consume more animal fat and more animal protein in comparison to some other gene pools, without contracting, cardiovascular disease really early on. However, you will find, if you look at the studies and the examination, post-mortem examination of all of those Eskimo tribes, you will see that they have had, even in their previous dietary patterns, have had been developing cardiovascular disease, which is attributed to eating in a sort of way that they had been eating. So their lifespan was really short. Their arteries were shot with real problems by layering all of their internal arteries with fat lipids, and essentially contracting coronary disease because of that. And a whole host of other issues. So yeah, I mean, if you on the other side of the spectrum and looking at my background, pale blue dot, you have a study of blue zones, the so-called blue zones. And the blue zones really are essentially a historical overview of still living or in history living populations that were on average able to live or achieve centenarian age, meaning 100 years plus. Yeah, on average, those were the population pockets which arguably you could say that it kind of exhibits the longevity issue or the longevity question. And observing their eating patterns, you will see that in most cases outside of the California or New Mexico in the United States, which have by religious faith, they have no animal products in their diet whatsoever. But other than the Seventh-day Adventists, you see a lot of you see a lot of populations which actually have a very tiny fraction of a very tiny percentage of animal-based protein in their average diet. And you can look at the Okinawa population, but that's mainly consistent of about, I would say, 70 to 75% yams and other tubulars. Yeah,
yams, potatoes. Delicious. I love sweet potatoes.
Yeah, that's like the superfood, right? It's the cheapest and the most nutritious.
It's so delicious. It has a lot of natural sugar in it. It's like you're eating like plant candy.
Yeah, exactly.
the China study. Have you read or heard of the China study, Alexander? Yeah, I think so. Where they, I think, I hear you.
Yeah, I think I dropped. Oh, my internet connection. It's probably a little bit unstable. Let me see.
Yeah. Every so often you fade out for just a very short period, like maybe a few seconds. So it hasn't been major.
Okay, let me see if I'm connected to my VPN. No, I'm not.
Is it slowing you down or is it speeding you up?
Who knows, man. It's a corporate VPN, so usually it just restricts me from accessing most of the let's say most of the things that I'm actually interested in. So I cannot access anything with regards to psychological development, alternative narratives, and specifically cryptocurrencies and NFTs. So that's
you can only look into got milk ads. That's the only thing you're allowed to see. Got milk. I remember in my middle school there was a giant like got milk poster in our cafeteria. I still remember that. It was like either like a cow and just like got milk, or like like the little milk mustache.
A hot chick with a little milk mustache.
And that's pretty evil. Like dude, they're brainwashing like little kids. Like like what are you doing?
It's
like the cigarette advertisements that got like made illegal. This should be made illegal. Dude, milk's bad for people. Like it just it's literally bad for people.
Yeah, actually, this is a good parallel. Most of the, let's say, nutrition conscious medical doctors, practicing medical doctors or even clinicians, they often use the parallel of the tobacco industry, which is the most recent case of us looking at, or let's say the generation before us looking at advertisements whereby all doctors recommend smoking Lucky Strike because it's
it's toasted. It's toasted.
two packs a day keeps the doctor away because you're gonna die.
And you see that all of those pictures have white lab coats. So I would be wearing a white lab coat if I could get away with it. Just in order
no, you can, and I mean you could. I mean it's a little disingenuous if you're like I'm a doctor, but you could that's just your title, right? You could just say you're a doctor and confer yourself the degree. There you go.
Dr. Green Thumb.
Paging back to Green Thumb. Guys, I was wondering if we could add, like nutrition, diet, psychedelics. It's very interesting to have a historical discussion about these things as well, especially as we have Alexander the King in the forum here. And I was wondering, when sugar came back in the 15th, 16th century, wasn't it considered a drug and illegal at first? Does anybody hear me?
I hear you. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
Alexander, it looks like you froze for a few seconds. Did you hear Edward and what he said, or?
No, I just heard the prompt. So if you could repeat the question.
Yeah, I was saying that when it's very interesting to have a historical conversation here as well in regards to nutrition and diet and culture and whatnot. And I was wondering how when sugar came back to Europe in the 16th, 15th century, wasn't it considered a drug and outside of culture in many ways, even if it had its attraction and everyone was eating sugars at home and confettis and hanging out, and having sugar rushes?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Sugar is actually in this form, any processed sugar is actually completely useless in terms of nutrition, in terms of providing actual nourishment or any specific micro or macronutrients which are necessary in order to cultivate and maintain one's optimal, let's say, functioning organism or body.
Homeostasis.
So so from this perspective, if we can understand the whole sugar trade and its historic implications with all of the slave trade, with all of the colonistic expansionist propaganda and the impact that it had on the world, and the actual corporate, or let's say beginnings of a corporate structure like the East Indies Trading Company, the first stock certificate issued company, which in comparison to other corporations, if we would translate that amount of wealth into today's standards, would still be fairly on top of Google and all other companies. So
their own separate country, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So if you look at it from this perspective, sugar, one of the main vehicles and one of the main components of trade, after spices and before crude oil, was actually the driving force for this expansionistic part of the Western culture. And it had zero nutrition value. So it was absolutely unnecessary. And there's so many and there's so many parallels to where we find ourselves today. Let's say, for example, with all of the elements of nutrition that we've touched upon before, which are also absolutely unnecessary in one's body. However, they do contribute to a growing arm of entrepreneurial corporate endeavors. So I don't know if this is what you wanted to touch on when it comes to sugar, or were you looking for something of a more, let's say, microbiotic nutritionist perspective on sugar?
It was perfectly explained. I was wondering, I was looking at it at a more powerful social context, and getting back to that, in the book Food of the Gods, our main man Terence argues, correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, argues that that psychedelics has been a part of the nutrition for the evolving of the consciousness, right? And that is a rabbit hole in itself. Many argue that that has not just been the case. It's not just like, we found psychedelics and then we went from monkeys to being wise. But a part of it can be argued that is true. And Terence really covers up, how in different cultures, this has been the case, whether if you're in the Northern Europe or if you're in Middle East. Yeah, and I was thinking, why is it that, you know, if we look at it in a pharmaceutical kind of way, doesn't everything that the white pills that come from a pharma company or the pharma industry, isn't it the bottom ingredients in these things from nature, even if it's a pill or whatever it is?
Yeah. So I guess, Trevor, unless you wanted to say something, I don't want to speak most of the time. So
yeah, just a quick comment. Well, technically everything's from nature, right? The computers we're using right now, our bodies, and then on a more meta level, right? We're all stardust, and then you go even further, right? We're all radiant. We're all God. We're all source. And anyways, that's another topic. But yeah, it was interesting. I listened to a lot of Terrence's lectures that were uploaded to YouTube by like We Plants or Happy Plants and other channels like that. But one of the lectures, he was talking about how, you know, the story that humanity started in Africa, right? The Fertile Crescent. And then there was a natural environmental desertification that was happening. So that actually pushed humanity out. But I don't know how long it was, tens of thousands of years or millions. Our human ancestors were living there. And, you know, the environmental change forced them to move away from the trees as like tree monkeys. And they had to now walk on the ground. So what he was saying is that actually like psilocybin mushrooms, I think it was mushrooms, right? Would actually give people like superpowers, like, and you'll notice this if you do a microdose. And when I was coming off my main one, right? So not tripping so hard that you're like losing yourself in infinity, but just like a little bit, your senses are magnified. Like I picked up on things with my eyes, like I ignored all the time. So like your attention to detail, your senses are heightened. And yeah, obviously if you're going really deep down the rabbit hole, then you're getting into like realms where, I forgot, there was a fancy word. Was it philophalagia or something? It's like basically, you know, shamanistic chanting, like Kumbaya de Yobe, you know, it's just kind of, it doesn't have an inherent meaning, but it's sort of like a proto language. And he was saying that, you know, sort of the psychedelics were one of the motivators for exploring language as this explorational tool, even before it had any meaning. And then someday someone was just like, Abra, and they pointed to something and everyone repeated, right? And that's how language maybe started. But
that's, thank you for that, Trevor. It was it's very interesting to hear about how the mushroom is used as a superpower. And you recently had a trip and you felt your senses becoming much stronger. Did you get any like, it's difficult, I guess, you know, because if you're a monkey human and you eat like psilocybin, you got a lot to get, you know. But if you're a neo guru living in Chicago, what's the mysterious aspect of it, you know, like having sense perceptions that are increased, and as you know, food is much better, and if you don't have any appetite, you want to eat, you know, and stuff like that. But but in terms of like, maybe I'm following my own tail here, because you guys heard of Paul Stamets, the mushroom guy? He wasn't. He said that he got rid of stuttering from psilocybin mushroom for his first psilocybin mushroom trip. That's a superpower in many ways.
Sorry, I lost you there for a second again. My internet is terrible for some reason. I'm just now sharing a link in the chat box for the stoned ape fungal intelligence theory from Paul Stamets. Yeah, I was just gonna say, Edward, it's possible that that was the mushroom, or probably the lightning strikes that were happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey guys, we got a gift from Zoom. They've removed the 40-minute time limit on your group meeting.
Yeah, probably because I have a pro version and they saw that I'm in attendance. So
yeah,
even,
I'm probably gonna
even
have to get the pro version in a few weeks, but
yeah. So thank you, Zoom, for the gift. Yeah, I was just gonna say that Paul Stamets absolutely is a brilliant guy, and he's done you know, a lion's share of work when it comes to researching fungal intelligence in its natural habitat and being active on the field of creating patents, which are actually, you know, bio patents, and go against the grain of Roundup and all this, you know, evil expansion of corporate monocultural greed. So
yeah, what are you trying to do? You're trying to cure yourself? What? No, you have to manage yourself with infinity side effects for the rest of your life.
But that brings us to mycelium, right? Isn't that the intelligence behind mushrooms?
Oh, like the mycelial network. So yeah. There's like the forest, you know, and then
what you see,
sorry, go ahead.
Fruiting body of the mushroom. I lost you here for a second. Can you guys hear me again?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, you kind of cut out. So if you wanted to re-say like the last sentence or two.
Yeah, so I was just saying that the mycelial part can arguably be really described as the mushroom itself, you know, like a tree. And the topsoil mushroom that we see, the fungal, is actually the fruiting body of the mushroom. Yeah. So it's like an apple tree is the tree and the apple is the product. So yeah, we're technically consuming the products or the fruiting bodies of the mushroom, not the mushroom itself. But yeah, the mycelial network that's another really mind-blowing exploration in my view, because it really speaks of how nature really figured internet out a lot earlier than we have.
The proto-internet,
the kind of internet of trees, whereby you have, you know, underground highways of information exchange and trees, even the mind-blowing realization and insight that the larger the seedlings, whereby they do not receive sufficient sunlight, the larger trees actually provide and exchange all of those nutrients. They send it through the mycelial network to support you from that, if anything.
yeah, that's the mother tree idea, right? Where there's like certain like big trees. And no, that's interesting, because that's actually something for us as a society. Like if we are to cut down trees to make stains or furniture or paper, to have that wisdom to not cut down the mother trees, because you'll destroy the forest, because they're the ones that ensure that energy is going to where it needs to go, and like water resources are going to where they need to go, which is really so crazy when you think about that. And that's why I think forests are way more beautiful than the more artificial, like tree, you know, and like an artificial line in urban or suburban environments, because I'm sure those trees are maybe interconnected, but it's just such a meta representation, right? It's like we haven't just isolated ourselves, we have isolated all of nature as well, right? We like our society has this isolating effect as the consequence of uninhibited rational expansion, or whatever you want to call it.
You're useless. You're useless.
There's
another
Alexander joining.
Yeah, I'm just tuning in to see whether this internet. Oh, oops. Yeah.
Don't have the echo of doom. Yeah.
Yeah, Trevor, when you had your recent trip with psilocybin, did you like puke or anything, or had a
No,
bad stomach?
I went into it fasting, and actually probably 2 hours into it, or I don't know, my sense of time was jacked. So I mean, it kind of felt like it was like 50 hours or like 20 hours, not in like I'm getting sleepy sense, but just in terms of depth of density, right, of experience.
Yeah.
But at some point after I did the 2 sonic breath works and went to the bathroom like 2 times, I found my way into the kitchen and I got an orange and I cut up the orange and
The
hold it.
sexual or
Yeah. And holding this knife, I felt like I was like a wizard, like I was performing some sacred rite. And then I cut this orange, which was like kind of weird. And then I just looked at the orange and like the color was popping right outside. It was a gray, cloudy day, like normal in Chicago. So this color was just like poof in comparison.
Yeah.
And then I ate it, and yeah, I had more sense of like the juices running down my throat. And I think I ate like 1 or 2 oranges, and yeah, the orange felt really good to eat. Like it just felt great. I remember I also ate some peanuts, and the peanuts I could really taste, felt very dead. I don't know how else to say it, but very dead. The orange still felt like very alive. I don't know. Like I know some people
Nice.
say that like fruit has the highest energy frequency, but just from that, I would agree, because it's just like the fruit is still closest to the source besides probably
Yeah.
sunlight or breath itself. So
Yeah. Fall fruit is also, didn't Steve Jobs go on a fall fruit diet?
what is
Just
that?
eating fruit,
Oh, just fruit.
fruit that has fallen from the tree,
Oh yeah, so super
not
fresh fruit.
picked. Yeah, not picked,
Oh,
but
because
fallen.
picked would be too soon, but when it falls, it's ready. Right? It's ready. Yeah. No, that's a good idea. Yeah, because then it's more ripe and
Yeah, it's so
yeah.
cool. Just a side note on the trees that produce air and everything, and you have these all different beautiful trees. Someone is like, hey, some trees like I can make some apples as well, not just oxygen, guys. And they're
Yeah.
still producing and doing this important thing and don't giving a crap about anything else.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful metaphor.
But I feel like also during the experience, I could really feel like, I don't know, like how a plant feels, like just this infinite spiraling into itself. So I don't know how a tree thinks or feels, or how fungi think or feel, but yeah, if it's a glimpse into that through the mammalian vessel, right, of this human body,
Yeah.
it's a fascinating thing, because I know a lot of people, because I experienced mega strong ego dissolution, but I wouldn't say it was like the ego was gone. There was still some structure there, right? There was like the framework of the building, right? But there was no one in the building, right?
Yeah.
Sort of like metaphor, but there was still something there, right? And you could say that's the soul, or his radiant presence, or God itself, or in the oneness or something. But I like the metaphor though. It was like my ego is in the backseat of the car, kind of like snoozing, taking a nap, kind of like half awake, and then like someone else is driving the car.
Yeah. I heard a trip by Terence McKenna where he said that when he was on mushrooms, a real heroic dose, the mushroom was like talking to him, and he said to the mushroom like, "Why a mushroom?" And the mushroom answers back and says, "Well, why all the fuss with being a human, with bills and insurances, and so it's very intellectual, the thing that communicates. It's so interesting. Is Alexander still with us?
Yeah, I'm here, guys. I think I managed to, because I connected through my mobile device just in case, because it was really unbearable for all of the internet disruption and the breakages. But it appears that it's now functioning. I've been able to pay attention to the entirety of the conversation. So let's continue. When it comes to the mushroom image itself, there's one thing that came up for me. One of my earlier experiences of consuming mushrooms and observing this image of, like a humanoid or a sort of a mushroom which has human attributes. And then just looking at this large head, it seems like it's a sponge and it absorbs everything. So no wonder it's intelligent and it's smart, because it's a sponge, it's a spore.
Yeah.
And I think that's now circling back to what you were asking before, Edward, with regards to the potential explanation of the whole evolution of human society and how we came to be this intelligent, less hairy version of an ape walking about. You can see that's something that I wanted to touch on. You can see, looking at all of the cultures, all of the religious, cultural exchanges, they're all based around the same principles of, questioning existence and asking ourselves the questions of what we're doing here. And what you will also find, looking at from a, mythologically comparative perspective, you will see that most of those cultures are really built around psychedelics of some sort, almost without exception. In the Greek, the classical Greek society, you have the this just eluded my mind now. It's the Eleusinian mysteries and the Kikeon, which is illicit brew, which was essentially ingested before the exploration into the mythical mysteries of nature, of the goddess Demeter. You can see in the Hindu culture, you can see soma as the let's say similar counterpart to this, which is also a mysterious substance that essentially was able to open up the vistas of human consciousness. You can see there's a lot of, I think this is even closer home to you, Edward, with all of the imagery of gold, cannabis consuming culture in the regions of Iran, contemporary Iran. So it's all over the place, essentially.
Proposition. The soma thing is very interesting, Alexander. Were you done, Alexander?
Sorry?
Were you done giving your answer?
No, I'm never done.
Okay.
Just keeps going forever.
I'll hold.
No, I'm just kidding. I just wanted to circle back to your question, because there were so many technical interruptions in between, and I really wanted to provide that view as well.
Thank you for that. A lot of questions arise when you guys answer questions, so it's like it's impossible to follow the thread for me.
Yeah, me too.
You also have the Amanita muscaria. That is also a deadly fungus, right? If it's not used rightly.
Yes, it can be deadly in copious amounts, because it has a very specific part that needs to be filtered out in order for the liver not to reject or get poisoned, essentially, by this substance. But if it's consumed in large, in smaller quantities, it will strain the liver. Liver is essentially the main filtering organ, the main filtering organ in a human body. So anything that has no place to be in a human body will first go through the liver. So that's the organ that you want to pay most close attention to, and make sure that you don't overstrain it with consumption of too much alcohol and other substances that it needs to filter.
Animal fat.
Just chug 30 gallons of beer.
It's very interesting. I read someplace that in the up north here, they gave Amanita muscaria to reindeers and drank the reindeer's piss just to get rid of the toxic components of the Amanita muscaria in shamanistic culture here.
Yeah, that's true actually, because if you feed the reindeer the Amanita muscaria, the actual excretion of urine will already have filtered out this toxic substance. So it's gonna be a little bit more repulsive, but yeah, less training for the body.
Wait, does that actually work? Wouldn't like boiling or something else be like a little bit more of a maybe sanitary method?
Yeah, it does work. It does work, but yeah, there's more, let's say, laboratorically clean versions of doing that without using the poor reindeer. Which, by the way,
The
probably
reindeers like die.
reindeers probably love Amanita muscaria because it allows them to fly in a similar fashion like the ape counterparts that we are. So I wouldn't want to cut them short of that experience, right?
No, not at all.
It's a natural laboratory, right? It's on the move. Think about it. If you could domesticate one or two of them and like they're like your companion, you just start like wandering around the world.
Yeah,
that'd be pretty epic. I don't know. I feel like
you mean like Santa Claus, or
like Santa Claus
bearing gifts descending down the chimney because the snow.
he disappeared.
Oh, Alexander, you just cut out for like, oh, are you back?
Amanita muscaria, which is then dried on the fern tree next to the stockings hanging above the fireplace.
Yeah.
No wonder that those imagery are really, really connected to the Amanita muscaria, which runs really deep in our culture.
Yeah. Do you have like a library of Alexandria at home, Alexander? You're very well read.
Yeah, I actually have quite an extensive collection of books. Yeah, I was just thinking the other day that it's really impractical if one wants to adopt a more nomadic lifestyle, to be able to carry that library. So I'm more focused on building a digital repository.
Nice.
Yeah, but
like a Wikipedia, but for mysterious. What's it called? It's called
a cult, probably. What you're
not necessarily a cult, more spiritual,
esoteric.
Deep. Esoteric, thank you. That was the word. Esoteric.
We could call it Mysticpedia or Mystipedia.
Yeah. One thing I also wondered was looking at history, like the history of civilization here in Europe. I see that mostly it's been monarchs and whatnot, but what happened. The question is, Napoleon Bonaparte came, and he like changed the game in many ways, and moved and like removed the royalism from the narrative. But when he crowned himself, he got back to the old ways of ruling, even if he wanted to do something else. But how could he manage to do all these things without any occult? Or was he an occult person? Is that a weird question?
No, I don't think it's a weird question. I think it's a question which is spot on, because if you observe many of the politically visible individuals in human history, you will see that they all had a brush with the occult in some way, shape, or form. The entire, if we take the Nazi Germany, for example, it was built around a very powerful mythology and occult myth. So they were essentially utilizing what we now understand also from this, occult hacking or ethical cult hacking perspective is one of the basic fundamental psychological drivers for us operating in tribal and collective settings. So of course, any reasonable, intelligent human being understands this being the operative piece of the puzzle to move any collective endeavor forward. So Napoleon Bonaparte was no exception to this. He had a very good grasp of mythology and the importance of myth and storytelling and narrative arcs. And you can also see the explorations of the Napoleonic armies to ancient Egypt, pretty much all of the larger political images and leaders had a sort of an unquenchable thirst to explore the pyramids of Cheops for some reason. And even if we look at the evolution of the, let's say, post-alchemical, post-royalistic European part of history, after the 30 Years' War, whereby we, replaced and dismantled the monarchic absolutist regimes with republics, which are, the Enlightenment period, the advancements of scientific, rational minds, and the beginning of what we now understand to be republican regimes. You can see that with the onset of that Victorian era, we also had on the other front a development on the mythical, and occult, whereby all of the magical traditions, which were essentially and still are built on this fundamental ancient Egyptian myth and occult knowledge. You will see that the 18th century was essentially a very, very mystical and mythical part of human history. So this hasn't died out. This is still front and center. It just kind of oscillates in terms of visibility, and it oscillates also because to some extent it's occult and it's hidden because of the historic periods in time throughout which the individuals holding this knowledge were persecuted for obvious reasons, right? But now we live in an era whereby we can connect from each and every point of the earth and just assemble and curate this knowledge to such an extent that it is actually at the palm of our hands. But still, pornography is the pornography is still the most let's say widely accessed category of information, if you will. But
I wonder why.
but the thing is, Alexander and Trevor, money and sex are two things that are very important for the human being in this realm, and it's not adequately taught in school. Money and sex, it's two very important subjects, very important for every human being.
You mean in combination, or?
No, not necessarily in separate themes, and how it's important to we don't learn how what sex is, and how that works. Speaking of pornography and stuff like that, but it's also important to know what questions to ask. Having the Library of Alexandria is one thing, but you got to know which books to read as well, and how to read and understand.
Yeah. I think sex is a very specific domain, which is better to be learned on the job, so to speak, not in the library, unless you're doing it in the library, which is also one possibility.
Yeah, if I can jump in, diving into Tantra, actually, the reason why sex is so people are afraid of it is because if you take it seriously and you go deep with it, you're going to reach to the core of what it means to exist. I mean, you could do this with anything, right? But with sexuality specifically, it's such a powerful drive, right? Like if you do long water fasts, you will run up like a brick wall. You will hit. Oh, I think Edward just did he? Oh, are you?
I'm here.
Still here. Just not in video form.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I set up my display where it only shows the videos of people. So I thought Edward, you dropped out, but
I'm here, guys. Sorry.
Okay.
Keep going.
No, it's so good. So yeah, with diving deep into sexuality and sex, it's like diving into hunger, like diving into these base needs that are like rooted, like programmed into these bodies, right, as being biological organisms. So if you can grapple with the full depth of that, then you basically can grapple with what it means to be like in this body on like the deepest level. So it's fascinating because in Tantra, they have the two perspectives, or not just Tantra, but in yoga, right, in general. There's the path of the ascetic, right? It's the person who gives up everything, renounces desire, money, wealth, like I'm never having sex, right? Vow of celibacy. And then you have the other path, which is what Tantra offers. It's like, no, you're actually going to accept old experience. And through that experience, you would use a mixture of intensive discipline, but also surrender. And it's an interesting balance where ultimately it's a surrendering. Because I do think the path of will can get some people to what you could call enlightenment, but it's ridiculously hard. And like even in monasteries and stuff, there's probably only like, you could probably count on two hands the number of people who are alive now, who have reached enlightenment through will alone. Those are like godly people, like so, but the path of surrender, anyone can reach that. And it has its own challenges, but it's in some sense the easier path, right? Because instead of having to like just be this god of discipline, right, you instead just like give up all the dead wood, right, like what Jordan Peterson says, which isn't easy necessarily, but it's but then through that, right, through these practices and through deepening your understanding of sex and sexuality, it kind of opens the door to what it means to be this kind of creature.
In what way, Trevor? If you don't mind, Edward, to jump in with a question.
In what way of what it means to be like a human or whatever?
Yeah. If you could have, provide a more specific, more concrete example of what you mean with this.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe I'm getting too fluffy. Even I don't know what I'm talking about. Just rambling on. Well, on like a physical level, right? If you look at it from like the rational evolutionary perspective of we're creatures that are, we have these desires to procreate, to continue our species, right? So there's that level of it. But then on this deeper level, right, the connection of sexuality is this deep longing for another, right? It reaches to this fundamental, almost existential level of longing for that deep connection or intimacy or wholeness, right? So in some sense, by diving deep into sexuality, it's not only that you can reach a greater level of intimacy with your partner or partners or whatever in a sexual sense or intimacy sense romantically, but that you can reach to this core where you realize like this divine unity of all things anyways. And you can ritualistically do that with like in tantric sex, like a tantric sex ritual where, usually man and woman will come together and do this like intensive breath work and practices to reach this like psychedelic state of cosmic consciousness, which as we were saying, you could reach with psychedelics like with shrooms or other intensive meditation forms, but
or with a good novel.
Or free will, as you were saying.
Or good movie.
Trevor, you wrote an article about suffering and how that can help become more enlightened.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct? Is it necessary to suffer, or can one become enlightened without suffering?
Was that the article on Taste the Boredom? Or is that something else?
Yeah, maybe. But it's I think so.
What's fascinating, right? Because in one sense, if you look deep enough, on one level, there is no self, there is no actual ego or I to be experiencing the suffering, right? In that identity story sense, it's almost artificial, even though it's also real, like it's real in a sense. But yeah, because what is it? In Buddhism, right, they say that all suffering comes from attachment, right? And you can really feel that if you're not attached to anything, if you like take the Zen 2 words, resist nothing, right? Ultimate surrender, there is no more suffering, right? It's just not possible. You will still feel pain. Sure. If someone starts to burn your hand off, you're like, and you might react, right? Just like anyone else. Like you don't want your hand burned off, but there's no suffering. There's pain though. Like, and maybe that's a difference. I don't know if the words capture it, but how I view suffering is a loop story of, oh, that guy burned me, I hate him. And then blah, 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 blah. You have all this attachment. Whereas pain is like someone punches you in the face and it hurts, right? Unless if you're going to like take some drugs or do some crazy meditative practice to turn your pain receptors off, like you're going to feel the pain. And you will also probably still have the ego story. You'll still have the suffering story. And maybe you could say different people at different levels experience more or less suffering. But even when you experience the suffering, it reaches this meta level, right? Where even though the ego is still in a suffering bubble, you're almost behind the ego, watching it in the suffering bubble. And you're like aware of the meta level of that. And you're also aware of the pain. And they're simultaneously like all one thing at the same time, even though you can perceive it as being separate. I don't know if that helps.
That was an answer from a non-being in some sense. It's like there was no subjectivity in the answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually second that notion, Trevor. I think this is a really good distinction between pain and suffering. I think suffering is essentially just a propagated after effect of any experienced pain, while pain is a sensation, right? So by breaking this cycle of being attached to pain, then you essentially recognize and are able to just drop the suffering, allow it to go through the body, through the system, and materialize through, let's say, a non-serving or less than optimal narrative. And as soon as you're able to recognize it, you're just able to drop it and not suffer the consequences or the extended suffering, so to speak. Yeah. So I think, it all boils down back to attention. Whatever we are aware of actually loses its hold, loses its power, because we can detach from any identification with that specific thing or process whatsoever.
Yeah, have you both read Eckhart Tolle and like his writings on the pain body?
No, I haven't. I mean, I think I started reading one of Eckhart's books. I'm not sure which one by title exactly, but if you can remind me, what's the book title that you're referring to?
The Power of Now, or like I think he had the New Earth. I don't have any videos off the top of my head. If I find one later.
Okay. Yeah, I think I started reading The Power of Now. Yeah.
Okay. But I would say check out his language, because the way he describes this is super like visualizing rich. Like you read it, and reading it is the meditation, and you like your senses will, if you're, he's like describing, like notice your breathing, and like he walks, it's like a guided meditation through text. And,
I have those books in this. Okay. I have those books in Swedish. I think that Swedish falls short to English in spiritual language. I have them in Swedish, and it's very difficult to grasp the deepness of it when it's But I hear you, brother. Thank you for the recommendation.
It's very pragmatic spirituality, no fluff.
Yeah.
Although he does talk about some like metaphorical things with like Jesus Christ or something. So maybe he was writing to like appeal to a Christian audience, because But I mean, that's whatever. I mean, what he wrote was true, right? Like Christ is this like divine image. I mean, regardless of what you believe about the actual existence of Christ, like Christ is simultaneously like the divine child and like the king lover. It's like the embodiment of like the mature masculine. Just like you could take the original Buddha is a great example of like this embodiment of like an ideal human being.
Yeah, there's maybe just one nuance I'd like to add here on Jesus imagery and iconography, which is, you said the mature masculine. However, if you try to observe it from the perspective of the four major archetypes, you can see that Christ is actually the sacral king, but it's the one that was sacrificed. It's not the fully generative king in its full power, right?
It's like the proto. It's before the fuller version, right?
Yeah, or even arguably after the fact.
So even you would say after like the resurrection, it's still not the full like embodiment.
Yeah.
Okay.
From a fully realized king archetype perspective, we could argue that Christ doesn't have a kingdom. Essentially, he's the one that was sacrificed for the human beings, for the people, for his people. And that is an imagery of a king that is dethroned, in essence, right?
One question I would like to add here also in regards to what we're talking about is that I read in Augustine's Confessions, the saint, that he was a sex addict before. He was addicted to sex stories, and bragging about sex he had with others, with women when he was younger, and how he transcended that to become a saint. He used the pain.
He went from fuckboy to philosopher king.
Yeah, that's the way to put it. Speaking of saints and Trevor and whatnot, I just
Domo Halo.
Yeah, I know. I just found it so interesting because it's like humanized the saint in him in so many ways.
This reminds me of a quote which was supposedly shared by Osho, saying that whenever he speaks with the priest, they apparently only want to talk about sex, and whenever he talks with the prostitute, they always appear to want to talk about the spirit and the soul.
Well, there's no distinction between the physical and the spiritual, the carnal and the immaterially uplifting. And it's a very unique perspective though, and that's why I really like Tantra, because it's like, for example, there's one song I like on Spotify that's good vibes only, like literally, and it's like good vibes, I only good vibes, right? And then there's another song where it's like all vibes, I'll take whatever you can throw at me, I'm an alchemist, I'll transmute it. And it's like, yeah, that's me, dude. It's like but I can also transmute the negative shadow of someone who only wants good vibes, right? Because there's a deep shadow there. There's someone there who's like, I only want positivity and peace and love, but they're probably running away from all the evil and like demons in them that want to go slap everyone they don't like in their life, like slap their heads off. So
is this through the sonic experience, Trevor? You hear the vibes and the thing?
Oh, this was just on my Spotify. There's two songs. One song is literally called like Good Vibes Only, and then the other song is by a different person. It's called like not only I forgot the name, but it's the main lyrics is like not just good vibes only, I'll take whatever you can throw at me or whatever, like this idea of like they'll take any energy, and that's the Tantra core. right? That's why you can use sexual energy, which can be incredibly destructive, right? Like look at how it's being outpoured into porn and destroying people's lives, or like in bad cases of aggressive sexuality, like with rape.
Me Too,
and
the Me
abuse.
Too thing.
Yeah. So no, sex is a terrifying thing because it's so powerful. That's why like when I was doing a lot of writing 4 or 5 years ago and diving into with like Jungian archetype analysis and other people of my sexuality through these archetypes, it was terrifying. And it was like really, and that's why those writings even nowadays have a lot of power, because it was like I was channeling like these dark currents and I was putting it into writing and drawing. And that's why like they still have this like energy charge, which is probably something for me to still release, right? Because I'm still clinging on to some vestiges of that fear. But so I can totally empathize why people are afraid of this topic. I mean, it's like looking at your aggression, or, you know, viewing in yourself the villain, right? In Harry Potter, right? Harry grapples with this, right? He has a part of Voldemort in him, right? And that's a good metaphor. We all have like Voldemort in us. It's not just Harry, it's everyone. We all have like this archetypical demon or devil in us, right? Like Solzhenitsyn said the line between good and evil runs right down the heart of every human. And it is true, good and evil in some sense like are just constructs, but if you look at the more archetypal energies, right, positive, negative, yin yang, I think that's a more inclusive thing, because sometimes the negative destructive energy is exactly what you need, right? You need Kali, right, the great goddess, to kill you, to chop your head off and drain your blood so that, you know, kill your ego, right, metaphorically. Some people took that a little too literally and made death cults, I think, and actually did sacrifice people because they're retards. But I'm just saying it, dude. Kali's great, but yeah, screw those death cults. Now I'm gonna get assassins coming after me.
But the question is, but here's a very interesting question, and that is having access to the dark realm inside of you. Dark, just for the sake of our argument. Yeah. Does that make you a better human?
If you temper it right. For example, some people can fall into darkness and they don't have the right intention, they don't have the right support, all of that, right? And
Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg.
Well, you keep going darker in a bad way, right? It's like the hero's journey, right? You go on a hero's journey, but if there's no return trip, there's no bringing the gifts back, there's no integration. It can be bad, because then you've just basically trained up to be like this demon, right? And there's no, you're not bowing to the king, right? You're not aligned to a higher vision. And those can be extremely powerful, dangerous people that are not very good. You know, you can
Napoleon, as we were talking. Yeah.
So it's interesting. I do think, though, to be good, you need to dive into the dark, though. So it's inevitable. You have to take the gamble. Either way, you got to take the leap of faith to be good.
Yeah, there's a beautiful text from Charles Eisenstein on the revenge of the Sith and the whole, Star Wars deconstruction of that narrative arc from a perspective whereby the Siths are actually the ones who are more integrated and actually have a better grasp on, the Force in comparison to the
the naive Jedi.
The naive Jedi that are actually the proponents of, oh no, just focus on the positive and ignore the negative, and not just ignore the negative, let's destroy it
and suppress it. Like Yoda completely ignored Anakin, right? He's like, don't worry about you like wanting to like resurrect your girlfriend or whatever. Let's just not talk about it. What could go wrong?
So from that perspective, my analysis would be that the most dangerous individuals are actually the ones who are unaware of their destructive capacity and power, while the individuals who have grappled with their demons, their devils, and the destructive capacity that they hold, they are aware of being dangerous individuals, but they're mature enough not to act on that and rather transmute and utilize that inherent energetic frequency to a more creative outlet, right? And that's, in my mind, what makes a distinction between somebody who is unaware of this and one who obviously you can see in their eyes that they are dangerous individuals because they have had that experience in life, right? Yeah. And they are aware of that destructive capacity within them. But I think that without having that experience of submerging into one's darkness, you are more dangerous, arguably.
Yeah. Is the shamanic, or not the shamanic necessarily, but the old anthropological societies that have initiations for young men at certain ages, is it to invite this kind of darkness early in their life, so as to be able to master it and understand it better as you get older, and not become this violent 20-year-old who listens to high music and is angry all the time, passive aggressive?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the core of that specific tradition of, let's call it nomadic or archaic tribal, let's say culture, the maturation process is essentially demarcated by this ritual death and rebirth enactments. In some cases, it's even including severe mutilation and severe pain and punishment and banishment from the tribe. But in its essence, it is a decoupling, a death of the child, of the boy, and a birth of a man, right? So I think this is a crucial key missing element in our collective global society and culture, which lacks this specific transition, which lacks this initiation process, and doesn't really have a clear grasp on what creates a more a more coherent collective, rather than a collective that is based on individuals that have undergone all of those necessary initiations into adulthood. For a lack of a more sophisticated expression, let's just call it adulthood.
I want to jump in here. I think if we could wrap up the meeting in the next few minutes. So I'm just going to say a bit of reflection on what you just said, Alexander and Edward, and then if anyone has any final comments or whatever. But I just finished watching Harry Potter a few days ago, all the movies, and spoilers, I mean, it's been out for 10 years, so you've been warned. If you're watching this recording, if it's on YouTube, I guess, is like Voldemort kills Harry, right? He dies, and then he goes to like the spirit world, and it's really Voldemort, the evil in him, that kind of dies. And in that sense, it was sort of meta, right? It's just sort of, he confronted, right, his biggest fear, Voldemort, directly, right? He knew he had to die, right? Like Dumbledore in the vision of like that Snape gave him with the teardrop told him like, you have to die, right? So Harry like is obviously he's scared, like, dude, you've got to go die, basically. So he didn't know he was going to be like reincarnated, right, in a sense. But I viewed that was the moment in Harry Potter where Harry went from being a boy hero to being a man warrior, right? That was the transition. He had to die and let the darkness sort of die, integrate into him. And then he gained the power to defeat Voldemort. So just in popular media that comes up, and I find that interesting.
That's a very nice thing, Trevor. And I was last question. Where does Jesus Christ come into this? He didn't have an ounce of evil in him.
Well, it depends on what version you're looking at, like the historical Jesus or the biblical Jesus. Like, because obviously, like if someone was writing anything about someone and idealizing them, they'd probably brush over all the little blemishes, or like, he was angry to me this one day, right? Like even Buddha, right? I feel like has been over idealized. Like I'm sure he was an asshole to people sometimes, and I don't know, maybe not. Like there's this idea in the Gene Keys of the city level of enlightenment. There's the shadow, the gift, and the city. And I've been feeling really strong into a lot of gift levels, but to get to the city level, it's like a meta. They say it's such a different level. So maybe it is true. They were like mega divine beings in that sense. So I could view it either way, though. You could view it as they were more realistic humans who sometimes made mistakes, but overall they were really ideal in relativity, or maybe they were like essentially almost perfect beings. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I think for a proper analysis of this, we would need to focus mainly on individual historic biographies, which are more, let's say, objective or available, or even better yet, that the individuals are still living, so we can observe their behavior and action in the real time. Because I think that's one of the dangers of observing iconography and mythological, pedestalized individuals, which obviously gets transcribed and transmitted through ages with a certain element of modification to, which is not necessarily malicious in its intent. It can also be just a misconstrued understanding of language and a mistranslation of some sort. But I think, we cannot really dive into the image of Jesus and try to pinpoint faults, because none of the text will allow us to do so. There's actually just one specific element that comes to my mind when you ask this question, which is the Jesus exercising his money lenders with the whip outside of the temple, right?
Get out of the temple.
Arguably we could say that this is an image of Jesus utilizing his samurai warrior energy and his evil streak in him.
Well, lovely share, guys. I'm gonna end the recording now, so thanks for coming along.